So I want to thank Sansi for partnering with us on this symposium, and I do want to say that we are certainly partnered in the US and globally on the war on melanoma. I never expected to be a patient advocate. I don't even think I knew what a patient advocate was. So that's my daughter, Charlie, and as you could imagine, it's very hard to describe anybody in 2 minutes, certainly not your own child, but I will tell you that she was a young woman of many contradictions. So went off to college and couldn't choose, so double majored in neuroscience and Russian literature. Took her med boards, was going to apply to medical school, and then went with a friend who was applying for a job on Wall Street, and somehow got offered that position and decided that because she knew absolutely nothing about economics, Wall Street, that would be the perfect job to take for a couple of years. Loved Italian opera, saw Madame Butterfly 32 times, but was also doing her own personal world tour of Caesar salads. But the one thing that she was particularly interested in from the time she was very little was saving the world. And so when we moved to San Francisco, she was 13, and she volunteered at San Quentin. And as I certainly knew was going to happen, she brought me home the name of this great pen pal that she found pinned up on the wall at San Quentin that was serving life at San Quentin, a very nice pen pal. She went on at 17 to win the International B'nai B'rith Youth Award for bringing the cause of Serbian women to the United Nations. She did many, many things. So you can also tell, though, from that glint in her eye, she had a wicked sense of humor. So Charlie came home one day with a pain. She had transferred to San Francisco. Took her to the doctor, pain in her chest. Sent her for a chest x-ray, came back fine, and he said, well, if you don't feel the pain again, you can forget about it, which she did. We consider that to be her 6-month reprieve. The pain did not return again until 6 months later. They did a lot of testing, brought in a bunch of doctors, and they decided that she had an itis, which appears to be pretty common in young women, and going to put her on a cortisone treatment. And then the internist said, you know what, let's just run a CAT scan. It's not going to be anything, it's fine, believe me, it's not a big deal, but we'll just check that box off. That was on a Friday. I took her to his office on Monday morning. She was going to start her cortisone regime, leave for New York on a business trip. And I've known him for many, many years, so when I walked into that office and I saw the look in his eye, to be honest with you, I knew at that moment. So it took a couple of days, but the final diagnosis came back as stage 4 melanoma, and Charlie died 9 months later. And in those last few months, when she was convinced that she was going to beat this disease, she also said that when she did that, she was going to do something about melanoma. So as you can imagine, after she died, I actually did not think that I had much of a choice. And so I became something that I didn't even know existed, which was a patient advocate. So AIM is now a global melanoma foundation. We are very involved with educational resources. Sansi told you about our very, very large, comprehensive website. We have a physician assistant on call. We run these kinds of symposiums around the country. We live stream them. But I also knew that without research, there was not going to be a cure. So, because in some other life, which is what it now seems like, I was a CPA, I did a tour of the US, literally a tour, and I spoke to many researchers, melanoma researchers. I spoke to pharmaceutical industry people, and I said, so I don't want to invent the wheel. What can I do that will make a difference? And many of them said to me, we want a fresh frozen primary tissue bank. So what exactly does that mean? It means that the primary, that first melanoma that they take off, holds the entire genetic code of the disease. So to really understand melanoma, you need the RNA in that fresh frozen tissue. And it can potentially answer questions like who's going to be susceptible to getting melanoma, whose melanoma is going to progress and whose isn't, which treatments are going to work on which patients, and just as importantly, which treatments aren't going to work. So I began, trust me when I tell you, I did not expect this to be a 15-year quest. When I spoke to the researchers, they did tell me, well, we've never had a large collaborative group of institutions do this. And the reason it's impossible. So the one thing I did learn after Charlie died was impossible wasn't really a word for me. I mean, what could anybody do to me at that point? So I said, well, let's see if I can do this. And I will tell you that the challenges are many. Happily, I didn't know them at that point. I thought that raising the $3 million would be the most difficult part. It still is a challenge. We've raised about half of it. But it's the nature of academic institutions that they don't normally, as Sansi suggested, work together. It's not the normal way of doing things. And on top of that, we needed to say to these institutions, if your top researcher is going to join, you as an institution have to give us the intellectual property rights. You have to give us ownership of the tissue, because otherwise the researchers won't take it. These were very hard hurdles. So I must tell you that I met Sansi, as I said, 13 years ago. And one of the things that I started doing after Charlie died, because I had a business card and a little baby organization, was that I decided to pass the laws that would ban indoor tanning under 18. I must tell you personally, they could just ban it completely, but to be realistic, under 18 was the goal. She was not an indoor tanner, but I couldn't see any reason why any young woman or man should be in those tanning booths, especially even younger. 11, 12, and 13, we know are doing this. So at that time, Sansi was in Utah. We were trying to do legislation in Utah. Everybody I spoke to said, well, if you're looking for somebody to testify before the legislature, you need Sansi Leachman. So I called Sansi on the phone. She has no idea who I am. And an hour later, she's not only testifying, but she knows everything about this tissue bank. And if you know Sansi, there is no melanoma project too little or too big that Sansi is not excited about being involved in. So Sansi was one of the original researchers involved in this and has hung in for the 13 years. So finally, I must say totally self-serving, on Charlie's birthday, which was April 5th, we finally opened up the first branch at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. The other 5 global branches will soon be following. Contracts are signed, so in the next 2 to 3 months, all of those sites, including OHSU, will be open and collecting fresh frozen tissue. So this is something that has never been done before. The goal is to collect 500 primary tissues, but we're also collecting the patient's medical history, urine sample, blood sample. They're filling out a survey that Sansi has put together about their history of tanning. And what makes this so challenging is that once that melanoma comes off, it has to be fresh frozen within 1 hour. Otherwise, the RNA dies. This is what has always made it challenging because most people have those melanomas taken off in a dermatologist's office. There's no way to consent the patient and fresh freeze in an hour and get a blood and a sample. So, as we said, the tissue will be fresh frozen. These are primary tissues, 500 of them, all of the patient's history, samples. And these are the sites. And I should tell you that most importantly, this tissue, all of the information will be open to researchers worldwide. So you have to apply, but you will get this tissue in order to do the important research that you're working on. So people have asked us how they can help. And the two things they always say is, so can I donate tissue? Can I donate funds? Well, unfortunately, up until now, you can't donate tissue because that melanoma you may have had that was taken off has long ago been what they call fixed in paraffin. We need to get that within the first hour. But anybody diagnosed going forward at OHSU or Pittsburgh or the other sites, that's exactly what we'll be doing. So if you have participated in any of the walks at OHSU, all of the money for those walks go to the tissue bank at OHSU and are dedicated for that cause. So if you would like to help us, you can help us with the walk next year and volunteer, or you can find us online. There's a place to donate, or you can contact me personally.